Today we're going to be making this zombie pumpkin head, so let's get to it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell to get notified. So I grabbed some of these jelly eyeballs and some of these glow-in-the-dark teeth and this little stuffed pumpkin, all from the dollar store. Okay, Mr. Pumpkinhead, let's get cutting. Eyes, nose, and mouth. And that's what it looked like when it was all cut out. I pulled out some of the stuffing just so I could manipulate the shape of the pumpkin a bit. I then hot glued the top and bottom of the vampire teeth onto the pumpkin head. For the sides, I kind of folded it over and then hot glued it in. I tucked in and hot glued some of the loose fabric that was lying around the nose. I then took this piece of black faux leather fabric that I had laying around and cut out for the mouth, the nose, and the eyes. I cut a little slit for the mouthpiece so I could fold it over on itself. I then hot glued the mouthpiece section by section. And here is the mouth all closed up. I then glued in the one eye and the nose piece as well. I printed out some eyes to glue on top of my jelly eyes and then just cut those pieces out. I wasn't sure which ones I wanted to use, but I went with the green ones. I used a little Mod Podge just to glue that down. I then mixed up a little bit of red and brown paint together and borrowed one of my cat's whiskers because it worked the best. I made small little strokes just to make it look like blood vessels. And here are my zombie jelly eyeballs. And I glued one of the eyeballs into the socket where I didn't have the black fabric. I used some hot glue at first, and it didn't work because it didn't really stick to the jelly material. But I am glad I used it because it did give me a bit of a frame to use some super glue to glue it in. Now I'm not really worried about all the hot glue marks and stuff, you'll see why later. And the eyeball's still squishy. Here I just used some hot glue to frame out a triangle piece that I was going to cut out for the nose. And I wanted to see if I could make a tongue out of the hot glue so I could stick it out of the pumpkin's mouth. So I just kind of made the shape of a tongue and then filled it in with the hot glue. I also made this vein looking thing out of the hot glue that the eyeball was going to be sticking to. And there's my nose and my tongue. Now that was the bottom of the tongue, so I wanted to make the top of the tongue as well so it wasn't so flat looking. So again, I just outlined it and filled it in. Once it was slightly dry, I lifted it off of the parchment paper and kind of molded it into a shape. I cut the hot glue nose to look like a skeleton nose. And better shape the tongue a little bit with some scissors. And this was the little vein piece that was going to be hanging from the eye socket with the eyeball attached. Now it's time to cover this guy in hot glue, which will later look like blood. I painted the tongue up a purpley pink color, and then painted the veins. And then painted up all this hot glue mess I made all over the pumpkin to make it look like blood. I then just glued the tongue into the back of this guy's throat. And threw some more blood drips on his tongue. I hot glued this gross vein into the eye socket and then super glued the eyeball around the vein. And here is the gross detached eyeball, and it's still squishy. I loaded up all the spots that I painted with some Mod Podge. Now using Mod Podge where there's a lot of crevices can be kind of tricky because it will dry, but it'll kind of dry to a white consistency if you don't get it in there good enough. And then I just took 4 pieces of wire and kind of tied them up loosely, and this is what I was going to use for the arms and hands. So I bent the one side and just bent in some fingers. Now I only did this on the one side so far because my mission was to shove this through the whole thing of the pumpkin. And if the fingers were all out, I wouldn't be able to get it through. I just used some brown acrylic paint and painted the whole arm pretty much to the very end. I didn't bother painting the last 3 or 4 centimeters because I knew I had to bend it anyways. I didn't want the paint to get ruined, so I just figured I would leave it for the end and then bend it and paint it after. I glued on some of these little nubs that I found around the house. Not that I really needed to, but I did it anyways. This pumpkin top was a little too cute for me, so I cut it off. I hot glued some little spikes onto it and then just painted it up with some brown acrylic paint. I wanted to give it some little curls, so I took some of this wire and just wrapped it around a paintbrush and then just glued them on top. I made some cuts on both sides of the pumpkin and then just shoved that arm through. I didn't need that stuffing anyways. And I hot glued both the arms into place on either side, making sure they were nice and secure. And then just hot glued his new revamped top hat. So I wanted to be a little extra and have this guy maybe holding a rat or something that he's eating. So I just took a little piece of this fabric material that I had that was fur and kind of drew out a mouse and cut it out. I hot glued all the end pieces together and then just stuffed them. I gave him a bit of a haircut because rodents usually aren't this hairy. I only made the top half of this mouse because the other half was going to be in the pumpkin's mouth. So I just hot glued the end to make it kind of look like blood drips. I glued on a couple ears. I took a little bit of clear glue and put it along the seam and used some of the remainder fur just to seal up where I'd used the super glue. I glued on some eyes and a nose. He's cute until you turn him around and see the blood dripping. I painted all that blood, made it look like he was just ripped right in half. I put a couple of hot glue blood drips on the hands of the pumpkin because he's going to be holding the rat and he's going to be dripping blood because he's eating it, obviously. I used a little bit of polymer clay and made this rat tail. It's supposed to be a mouse, but it looks like a rat tail. I glued a little fur around the bum of the tail and made him choke on it. And here is my rat-eating zombie pumpkin, all finished. It cost me a total of $6, and I have lots of vampire teeth and squishy eyeballs left over. Look at that cute little rat butt. Please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell to get notified. Thanks for watching!